What's going on, people? Welcome to another video in the album series. Now in this video, I'll be diving into some production tricks that I used to make my album more unique. And I promise this video will make a lot more sense if you've actually listened to the album. Link down below, it's out, go listen to it. Okay, let's dive in. So the first technique that I'm gonna talk about is switch ups in the outros. Something I did a little bit on my previous album Dusk that came out last year, but on this album I really went in on it. So a lot of the tracks will have a beat switch up by the end and will turn into something completely different in the outro. Now this is quite normal in other genres of music like hip hop and rap, for example, but with this album I wanted to give it a vocal twist as well, so it often switches vocal tone in the outro as well. My track Nasty with Gurf is the first example, where it starts off with a I'm trying to make it go up. And then at the outro, it switches completely. When I link with Gurf, the bounce get too cracked. Next example is from a song that already was out, but Bounce on 3. But then I switched the tempo, the vibe, the vocal, the production, everything towards the end. Now at the end of my song, Bounce on 4, it switches vibes completely. It's the same tempo as the rest of the song, but vocally it does something completely different. Now the beginning of the track starts kind of like Bounce on 3 with a soul sample that goes into like a bouncy drop. Yeah, so that's the vibe of the beginning, but at the end, let me teach you how to do it. I go on and on. Can't understand why the bounce so dumb. It's a switch up to a completely different song almost, but within a song. Obviously inspired by the likes of Tyler the Creator, Kendrick Lamar, Kanye West. Now, let's just break down this part because I feel like there's some interesting techniques to dive into. I go on and on. What you'll also notice is that it sounds super squashed and clippy. Now the vocals are actually deltaed. Shout out Nest Acoustics. So it's a way of creatively sidechaining the vocal to the drums in a way that sounds much more exaggerated. I go on and on, can't understand why the bounce so dumb. I done ate this and I left no crumbs. I'm dangerous, you see me, you best go run. Precision like a deli with the cuts. Spin around, look, I'm Louis Skelly with the touch. Saturating each time it gets an input signal, so each time a kick or clap or hat hits, it saturates. Also the vocals, to get this sound, I used Manipulator. I go on and on, can't understand why the bounce so dumb. So this is actually my regular tone, like I'm up there, like can't understand, like up there tone-wise, and then just pitching it down. I go on and on. But yeah, I'm super proud of how this outro turned out. And I really think, like, as a listener, when you hear this, you're like, oh shit, it's more. There's more to the track. Trick number 2. I put reverb on the bass in the hook of my track Magician. I'm a magician when I'm in the kitchen. I'm a magician when I'm in the kitchen. What I did here, let me just solo the... Now, since the lyrics are about being a magician, I wanted it to feel like magical, ethereal, if you will. So what I did was, on some of the bass hits here, I put reverb on the bass. Also on the main bass here, there's a little reverb. It's like a long haul reverb, because I wanted everything else in the mix to be super dry, so I added reverb on the bass. And I've seen this in a lot of videos as something you shouldn't do, but sometimes reverb on bass can make it super cool and 3D. Now I didn't have any reverb on the low end, so I just have an EQing out the low end of the reverb, so there isn't any like rumble down there. But everything above like 60, 70 hertz, above the root node, there's reverb on, which is a really unorthodox trick, but it really makes the leads here flow. Let me just mute the vocal. everything is almost all completely dry, but then the bass has reverb, which is kind of giving it like a floating vibe almost. It isn't as defined as it would be without reverb, but that's kind of the point. That's what I'm going for here.
Let me just go ahead and win. I play the beat like Fred again.
So the third technique I want to talk about is something quite unorthodox. I got a master back on my track Bounce 03, and then I took the outro part and I actually processed it differently. Like I took the actual final master. Now I actually went in and saturated that part more, added more bass to it and clipped it as well, just to get it sounding a bit more aggressive towards the end, because it is a switch up. So it makes sense, or it made sense in my mind, to sonically have it be a bit more different than the other part. So you come from this part. And then you go into this part, which obviously is a bit more dynamic. It has more organic sounds as well, which made it sound a bit weak compared to the rest of the track, which I obviously didn't want. So I added fuel to the ending. Let me just go back and forth. And let me just exaggerate the effects so you can kind of hear what it's doing. So it's just really squashing it, adding extra bass, adding saturation as well. And that, I feel, really fit the track. Number 4 is about vocal tones or vocal timbres. Now, if you're actually a fan of my music, you would know that my vocal sound is different from track to track. We have my like auto-tune yell voice like in Arena. And then you have my whisper voice like in King is Back. And then on this album, I dived into a whole bunch of different vibes. You obviously have already heard some in this video. There's also my rapping voice. I have a verse on this track.
Oven preheated, got the dough on rise. It be smelling so good that they know outside.
On Cash, there's also the high pitch like EDM vocal sample vocal that I do sometimes.
I've been getting that guac, dough, cheddar cheese.
Then we have my
weight on my shoulders, I lifted away, yeah. Pull up with it, I got dough.
So there's a ton of different vocal tones that I do on this album, because I feel like it's very interesting to hear an artist do different tones of his own vocal, because you can still tell that it's the same guy, but it's just different tones, kind of like what Kendrick is doing sometimes. That type of stuff I feel like makes for a super interesting and intriguing track to listen to when the vocal is playful and goes different places, which I really, really also explored on this album.
It's the right. That's like that is.
I almost didn't use any compression on the entire album. Like there's probably a few instances of compressor plugins on some of the songs, but so little. There is a lot of saturation in my projects, and saturation also limits the dynamic range, meaning that they also compress in some way. And I did use a lot of limiting and clipping in my tracks to limit the dynamic range, but not a compressor. And let me explain why. For my kind of music, I feel like clipping and limiting, which is more drastic than compression, sounds better for my kind of stuff. And in this day and age, where modern music production is literally just dragging already compressed samples into your project, I often don't feel like there's a need to compress. Now, if you watched any of my production videos back in the day, there would be a lot of group compression added, compression on the drum group, compression on the bass group, compression on pretty much everything. And I actually didn't do that at all anymore. I feel like just adding a clipper at the end of the group sounds a lot better. Now, there's a lot of saturation going on, so everything is kind of like pre-compressed from that. I feel like the only instance of a compressor plugin on my album is on Fred's master chain, my mastering engineer. I know he compresses a little bit on the master side, but that's very gentle, like a 2-to-1, 1 dB gain reduction maybe. That's it. But if we go through this plugin of my song Lift It Away, you'll see on the drums here, saturation, clipping. Then we have a group here, clipping. Ash Flat is the Ash plugin from Acoustica, one of my go-to clippers. Then if you go through like a bass chain, for example, that's a very extreme example, but that is being saturated here and it's being distorted here. meaning that the dynamic range just there as a safeguard. So yeah, there isn't really any compression in the project at all. It's limiting or clipping, or it's already being compressed from all the processing that's going on in the channel strip. That could have been a whole video. Why I don't use compression in my productions, or why I don't use a compressor. Anyway.
Run the track!
Moving on, I do have a bunch of cool bonus tips. Number one, if you've ever seen any of my production videos, you know that I process my stuff in groups. So I'll have a drum group, a synth group, a vocal group, a bass group. And that makes it really easy to, one, get a louder master by limiting the dynamic range of those groups, which I do with a clipper or a limiter sometimes if it's vocals. And two, the groups make it super easy to sidechain groups to each other to manage the mix better. Say, for example, the synths and the vocals are clashing a bit, and just, for example, have the synths duck a little bit in certain frequencies when you have the vocals clashing with them. The plugin I would typically use for this is M-Blender by Techivation or Soothe 2 by Oak Sound. Bonus tip number 2. I actually use the same kick in a lot of my tracks, and it comes from one of my mom's old drums. I then reprocessed that drum for my sample pack called the Bounce Pack, which you can get on Element Store if you want, and it sounds like this now. And that's then used in a bunch of my tracks. Here's an example. Now, bonus thing number 3. All of my sub bass on the album is just a sine wave. I don't use any other waveform for my subs. It's all just sine waves. Sometimes saturated, sometimes distorted, but the root wavetable is always a sine wave. That's what I use for all my bass sounds. Doesn't need a lot of explanation. I just don't like saw bass. I don't like square bass. For my sound, it needs to be more organic, more round, more subby. Sine basses are perfect for that. Really hope you guys can take some tips from this video. And as always, just comment down below. Let me know what you want to see in the next couple of videos. I'm still doing a few more videos on the album just to really round off the album series as a whole. But really hope you guys enjoyed the video. See you in the next one. Imelem, my album is out. Go stream it. See you in the next one. Peace.
Put up with it, I got dope in my blood. I be laying real low in a car. Running up, I got the plan, go call him up. Tell him the pen and I'm coming up. All of the weight on my shoulders, I lifted away.